Got my coffee and today's guest here with me, so we're ready to roll. I'm Michael Hanf, Executive Partner at Taival Advisory. Welcome to the Circular Coffee Break podcast, where we will be casually talking about everything circular and beyond. As always, we hope that the episode today is interesting, provides you a lot of insights and new perspectives and new ideas. But if you have feedback, ideas, improvements, suggestions, let us know. Drop us a comment in your favorite podcasting platform or send us a note to info@taival.com. Now, my guest today started off her career in Nokia, where she held different positions, including that of Head of Sustainability for Nokia Siemens Networks. From there, she went to become the Managing Director of the Finnish Ski Area Association, or Suomen Hiihtokeskusyhdistys. I'm sure I messed that up. Running the industry association for Finnish ski areas and ski schools. In 2015, she became the Vice President of Sustainability at Telia, a Swedish multinational telecommunications company and mobile network operator in Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, for those of you not familiar with Telia. From there, she switched industries to the airline and aviation industry and took the role as Vice President Sustainability at Finnair. I guess Finnair is well known, but for those listeners not familiar, it was founded in 1923 and is one of the world's oldest operating airlines. Today, she is the Vice President ESG at Amer Sports. Amer Sports is a global group of sports and outdoor brands, including brands such as Salomon, Wilson, Peak Performance, and Atomic, just to name a few to give you an idea. She's a board member in Veikkaus, the Finnish gambling monopoly, and also sits in the board of Protecting Children, an NGO focusing on protecting kids from sexual abuse. Between 2018 and 21, she has been the chairwoman of the board of FIPS, the largest corporate responsibility network in the Nordic countries, a leading promoter of sustainable business, and a developer of responsibility expertise. She holds a Master of Science in Economics from the University of Tampere. I'm really excited to talk about all of this, jump into various different industries and see what are the commonalities and differences. So thank you for joining me on the show today, Larilahti.
Thank you for inviting me.
Great to have you. And I mentioned already, I'm looking forward to jump into all these different industries. You have been working in a lot of different industries: high-tech, telecommunications, airlines and aviation, and now sports and outdoor apparel and equipment. From your point of view, where do you see the commonalities and the differences between these industries? Are there things that these industries can learn from each other, maybe in the area of circularity or more broadly sustainability?
I think the fundamentals of sustainability remain the same, regardless of the company, regardless of the industry. It's all about understanding your role in the society today and what do you want it to be going forward, creating that positive impact. All industries, all companies have both negative impacts, but also the positive impacts, and you need to work with the balance. Of course, there are differences. It's very different to look at an Airbus 350 airplane and a T-shirt in terms of circularity. But what is similar there as well is that you have to understand the whole life cycle of the products. You need to design them from the beginning with the end in mind. Be it waste management, be it reuse, be it repair, whatever it is, you need to get into that mindset from the start, and that is exactly the same for a T-shirt, and it is for a jet plane.
Interesting. Yeah.
I could still mention sort of tech and telecommunications. They have this kind of unique position where they have this enabling effect. Quite often their own environmental footprint is very small. When we talk about circularity, if you operate mobile networks, you don't own a lot of stuff per se.
True.
You have the base stations and so on, but in terms of volume, it's not that much, and they live long lives and so on. Then, of course, you have to take responsibility the phones that you sell and so on. But that is hugely offset by the fact that you can enable other industries lower their footprint through dematerialization, through efficiencies. I mean, who buys records anymore, for example?
That's true.
And unfortunately, nobody buys books either, because those are all digitized as well.
Yep.
And what was maybe a little difficult for me moving from telecommunications to aviation, one of the big things that telecommunications talks about: do not travel, use video conferencing, and so on. So but not saying that you shouldn't travel, but you need to be mindful of when you travel and when you can actually use digital means to achieve the same end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, specifically on that point, I mean, very often today we talk about degrowth, about lowering the consumption of not only travel, but products and services as a whole. And that for companies is a very own challenge, but it also opens up a lot of potentials and opportunities in that context. How do you see the maturity of the different industries? Are they on similar maturity levels when it comes to sustainability, or do you see that they are on different levels, taking different paths on the topic?
Very different in different industries. Some industries that have, if you look at forestry, for example, they have a long tradition of working with sustainability, because it's very, very at the core of their being. I was very surprised when I started to work with the ski industry how sustainable the ski resorts actually are. I was reading through everybody's annual reports and so on before I went, and I was like, oh, I'm going to teach them about sustainability because they're not doing anything. But once you're there, they do it, and they do it well, because that is their business. They need the snow, they need the beautiful nature, because that's what they're selling. They're often big employers in small cities, hence they understand the meaning of social responsibility as well. So it's very different, and some have started earlier, and some are still sort of struggling to understand how they could impact.
It's a very good point. I mean, it's almost existential for in the ski industry, but I think more and more industries are starting to feel that pressure, where sustainability is not optional anymore. It's not an add-on that you have on the last page of your reports, but it basically shifts into the core and becomes justification, enablement, to actually do business, be in business in that context.
Absolutely.
Now, today you are responsible for ESG at Amer Sports. What do you see as the main focus areas in the industry when it comes to circularity and more broadly sustainability, and how are you addressing these topics at Amer Sports?
We have, as an apparel company and a sporting good company, we sort of split our effort kind of 50-50 between social responsibility and environmental, because both are hugely important and both are hugely difficult in the textile industry. So we have basically at Amer Sports, we have 3 key focus areas, and those are circularity, climate, and responsible procurement and supply chain. And they kind of all link together as well, and they feed off each other. And we work quite extensively across the whole group, all the brands together, really to try to achieve the common goals on them. Circularity is probably, out of those 3, it's probably the most complex one, because it's not one thing. Right? It's about so many things. It's about design, it's about materials, it's about waste management, packaging, durability, new business models, repair, rental, all this. So it's a huge complex area, but we're very clear that it's something that we need to do from the responsibility perspective, because we want to be a good corporate citizen and we want to be a positive force in our industry. But also from the business perspective, we see huge numbers in terms of second-hand purchases in textile nowadays. People are really gravitating towards that. And I think we're kind of in a perfect storm right now, because there's so many drivers to it. We have the environmental movement and the sort of people starting to understand the consequences of their purchasing behavior. So environment, climate, circularity is driving it. Then, unfortunately, we also have the huge inflation and the economic downturn now, which is also pushing people to look for maybe more affordable options. And a third one I would raise is this increasing individualism, especially in sort of Gen Z and in that area. They don't want to buy something that somebody else might be wearing as well, but they want to find the unique ones. And we recognize that there are consumers that will not buy our jacket when it's new, but they would love to buy it in 10 years when not so many people are wearing it anymore.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then, of course, it's our job is to make sure that in 10 years it is as good as new.
Yeah, exactly. It can still be used and it can still be purchased at that point in time. No, really, really good points. And what I'm personally seeing, I think 10 years, 15 years ago, second-hand was something you would do, but you wouldn't necessarily tell your friends about it. Today, it's almost the other way around. I mean, today you tell people that you buy secondhand and you exchange basically hot secret tips of where you find the best secondhand clothing. So it has really changed dramatically in that context. So absolutely,
if you look at downtown Helsinki, the secondhand stores are in prime spots.
Yes,
they're at our Pride and Joy big department store in the middle of Helsinki and have nice cafes, and it is exactly like you said. It's like this pride in making that discovery and finding something unique, and so I'm dreaming when this new regulation is coming in and all the products are going to have that product passport in them. That could we also embed the stories in there? Can you imagine buying that ski jacket that you could see that, these are the mountains it's been to already? I think that would be
love that idea.
Amazing.
Yeah, and that would naturally add a new layer to that whole setup.
Exactly. And so durability is important. We see a lot because we only have brands that are sort of high quality and meant to last. So we see that they outlast the user, because the user might gain weight, they might lose weight, they just grow, they change sports. Anything can happen. So we're trying to figure out the ways to get those garments still in use, or like one of our brands, Arc'teryx, keeps saying that they need to be out in the wild. And we have Peak Performance just launched a new website for Wear Agains, where you can buy old Peak Performance apparel. Same with Arc'teryx. They have very healthy second-hand market going, and Arc'teryx also puts a lot of focus on repair. So you can take your clothes back to the store and they repair them. They also help you to repair them. They help you.
That's fantastic.
They teach you how to take care of the garment so that it lasts longer and so on. So it's all in that same area.
Interesting. And I think what it teaches us, I mean, if we buy a car, you buy a car having in mind what is the car worth when I sell it on to the next user, and how can I make sure that the car loses as little value as possible. In many other areas, we do not necessarily have that mindset. When I buy my sports gear, my sports equipment, I don't necessarily always have in mind, oh yeah, I could sell that on once I've outgrown it in whatever dimension we're now talking.
Yeah.
And that naturally is also something that more and more people will most likely start thinking about. If I buy a jacket or skiing pants or equipment that keeps its value, that I can repair, that I can maintain properly, and it has a higher resale value, that might make my buying decision or influence my buying decision in the first place in that context. So it changes the market dynamic quite significantly.
Exactly. And maybe you don't even buy it. Maybe you just have the guardianship for it for the next 2 years, and then you take it back. And you get an agreed upon sum of money back on your original purchase. And so that's it's hugely exciting space, and the new business models emerging. I'm not quite sure if we know now what's going to be happening in 3 years, because the innovation is quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's specifically in these spaces where you have a lot of innovation and fast-paced innovation, it's very often as much about prioritizing than about identifying the innovation, because you cannot go to 100 different places at the same time. You have to find the 1, 2, or 3 that you can prioritize, that you can test and really then scale, instead of being at 100 different parties at the same time and be nowhere really in that context.
Yeah, exactly. But innovation in general is I mean, that truly excites me, and it can be business model innovation, or it can be process innovation. One of the coolest things that we do at Peak Performance is that we have 3D modeling that is at the stage where we don't need to make as many samples as we did before.
Cool.
Because in the olden days, you sent every garment you sent to all your potential customers, all the chains, and then they look at them and I want this and not that. But now the 3D models are good enough that we can just send that and have them make decisions based on that. And it's a huge help for our design as well. They can look at it and go like, what if next year we do the zippers like this? And now it's a matter of minutes and not of days. And
it has a huge impact on the CO2 footprint, because you're not sending back and forth the material. It has a huge impact on the circularity, because you're not using the material in the first place, or you're producing only what's being needed. So absolutely.
So we count that 3D modeling, that is part of our circularity program, because it takes a lot of garments out of, it doesn't take them out of circulation. It just keeps them from never being produced.
Exactly. No, and I think that's something we will see anyway more and more, this interlock between the digital side and the sustainability side, because digital will play, as you just outlined with your example, it will play a critical role in that shift towards sustainability. Now, sustainability is a topic that's also gaining importance in the sports world. A lot of clubs, a lot of individual athletes are basically paying more and more attention to the topics. Recently discussed that a lot of the Bundesliga clubs in Germany basically have the topic very high on their agenda, and considering that in negotiations, be it with facilities, be it with equipment providers. Now, how are you working with different stakeholders? Because circularity, sustainability, we briefly talked about before we hit record, is a team sport. You cannot do it on your own. So how do you work with different stakeholders along the supply chain, or also with customers in that context, to support that development and also provide sustainable alternatives in the area of sports clothing, sports apparel, equipment, and so on?
I think the good news there is that everybody is sort of swimming in the same direction. So some are faster, some are slower, but at least we're not sort of going against the current. But our suppliers have the same goals as we do. Everybody is sort of taking their goals from the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we have the same end goal in mind. So we work very closely with suppliers. We have a lot of our own manufacturing as well. We also work very closely with athletes, especially in the ski part. and there we have athletes that are very vocal about climate change, about circularity, and we do support them. We have close collaboration with Protect Our Winters, because again our sort of values are aligned.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's very easy to see those values if you visit our factories. If you go and visit Salomon or you go and visit Atomic, they're in the mountains. And the people working there are mountain people, and they've been there and they've seen the change, and they feel the pain when you can't, maybe ski from your home to the office anymore like you used to. So it's super close, and it's therefore I think the dialogue is fairly easy. Also with the stakeholders, like the NGO stakeholders, as well as our athletes, because we very much have the same mindset.
And I think you're making an extremely important point there. Sustainability, circularity, all of these topics cannot be driven top down. You have to take your people, your employees, your customers, the wider stakeholder group with you on that. And as you pointed out, if the employees in the factories at the point of sales, they are the ones that are actually living in the middle of all of this. They understand why it's important. They feel why it's important, and they can basically then also react accordingly and take things forward. So,
and that is so important to have everybody on board when working with these things. You have to have sort of like this one line going all the way from your board to the last employee, so that everybody knows where we're trying to go. Everybody shares the values. Everybody shares the passion to get it done, and that's sort of when the magic happens.
Yeah. And absolutely, and it's not an easy transition. It's not an easy change we're talking about here. And as you pointed out, it's a very complex change. It's very often very abstract, many things you're talking about. So you have to take people with you. You have to make sure everyone goes in the same direction on that. Now, you've also been the chairwoman of the board of FIPS. And FIPS is naturally the largest corporate responsibility network in the Nordic countries. So in addition to having worked across very many industries, that naturally gave you an even broader view on what's happening in Finland and the Nordics. So how do you see the need for cross-company cooperation to enable that shift that we talked about, the shift towards circularity, sustainability, and where are we in that regard in Finland, in the Nordics, from your point of view, from your experience in your role at FIPS?
That cross-company collaboration is imperative. Without that, we have snowball's chance in climate change to get out of this. Because most of the challenges that we have are systemic challenges. Yeah. So you're going to need systemic answers, and there are no companies that can actually handle that on their own. And quite often, maybe the solution is on an industry that you didn't even think about in the beginning.
I agree.
So that type of collaboration is important, so that you have the whole value chain, you have that ecosystem together to work on the solution. Another huge benefit is just talking to companies in other industries, because they're looking at it from a different perspective, through a different lens. And they're probably seeing things that you don't see from your lens. So it's a diversity issue as well, diversity in thinking. So I try to talk a lot with people that do something that I don't much know about, because then it's that's like a gold mine for new ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And different companies have different maturities, different industries experience challenges, but also opportunities at a very different pace. So you have industries that are very far already. They have most likely addressed some of the challenges and have basically reaped some of the benefits already, where you might be able to learn from and copy things and adopt things from that.
Absolutely. And the collaboration has been, in my experience, it has always been very good. Even competitors sort of sharing information around the sustainability space, big seminars with very, very open talk on this. But I see that shifting now a little bit. And it's good and bad, because it comes from the fact that companies are now recognizing that, hey, this is a competitive factor for us. So maybe let's not tell everything to the competition. So this is something that sustainability people have had to learn lately, that, okay, this is actually important. This is strategic. Now, other people agree, not only us. So it's it remains to be seen if that's good or bad. I mean, obviously, it's not great if we can't share openly, but then again, competition typically speeds up development.
Absolutely. I mean, on one hand, I have experienced in the years that I've been now in sustainability and circularity, the community is very open. And I think that comes to a large extent from a very similar mindset and this understanding of, we want to achieve something bigger together. We're not necessarily doing that only for our sake, but we're doing it to address a bigger challenge that we're seeing, be it climate change, be it biodiversity loss, freshwater scarcity, social inequalities, diversity. I mean, you need, the list is long of challenges that we're trying to address. And I think that unites people and also helps in having that common platform and that common understanding and that willingness to share. At the same time, I agree with you. I think it's becoming more and more of a boardroom topic, more and more of a strategic differentiation in the market. So we will definitely see some of that shift in that context. I share your hope that it will not influence the ability to really address a common goal or address a common solution, but rather accelerate it. Because there's more focus, there's more investment, there's also more drive from the top leadership on these topics, and they maybe become part of these open discussions that we're talking about. How do you see the regulator? There's a lot of discussion currently about what's going on EU level, but also in other geographies. How do you see the need for a cooperation between the different stakeholders, be it regulator, be it customers, be it investors, and companies naturally, and the NGOs? How do you see the need to cooperate there in order to address that systemic change that you mentioned? Because that is definitely not an easy task to do.
No, regulation at this moment is a topic in itself. It's I mean, people are talking about the tsunami of regulation in EU, and that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
There are so many pieces of new legislation coming up, and I think it's good. Don't get me wrong. I think it's good that that the regulator has sort of taken a more aggressive role, because I could say that the first at least 15 years of my career in sustainability, I was not that interested in regulation, because I was lucky enough to work in good companies that were miles ahead of regulation. Yeah. So it was sort of like, yeah, okay, they will do it one day.
Eventually.
And we were not too interested. But right now I'm very interested, and they are pushing for us to be better in many ways. There are some pieces of regulation that worry me. One is that there's so much requirements for reporting now that I kind of worry that me and my team were using too much time in reporting and too little time in making the company better. Yeah. And that is the risk. Another thing that I see both an opportunity and the risk is the green claim regulation. Yeah. It's good that there will be regulation on what you can and what you cannot say, but I hope it doesn't shut everybody up, because again, it's the sort of the thrill of competition and seeing your competitor saying something, and it's like, oh, we need to get our butts in gear to be there as well. Yeah. So regulation good and I'm not going to say bad, but there are some risks involved.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's we talked so much about cooperation and dialogue. I think that's where exactly the dialogue is needed, where companies need to take an active stand, also to help the regulators get it right, and to basically influence regulation to go in the right direction. Because very often the regulators are not experts in these topics. It's just one thing on their agenda. So they need help from the experts to get it right. And I think it's in everyone's interest to get it right. And sometimes they just shoot over the target and they go too far in that. I think that's the nature of what the regulators do in Berlin and Brussels and Helsinki, wherever you look. So
so the industry associations are in a hugely central role here. You also mentioned investors, and that I think is so nice as well, and quite recent that the investors are getting on board. Yeah. It took them a while, but when they sort of started rolling, that really changed the temperature in the room, and that is great. To be completely honest, they're more worried about risks and business continuity than they are about sustainability. So then it's still on the companies to look at the sustainability part, not only the ESG part, not only the risk avoidance, but also sort of that long-term view and that contribution to the common global goals.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I mean, the investor community is very often driven by top and bottom line impact. So I think we also, as a sustainability, circularity community, need to start thinking in these terms. How do we contribute at the end of the day to top and bottom line? That's by being compliant and mitigating risks, but that's also by inventing new business models, creating new revenue streams, and all of these things. So it's two sides of a coin that we need to think about in that context. Absolutely, and then then if you're driven by risk avoidance, or if you're driven by money, so what? Yeah. How much does the planet care about your motivation? As long as you're doing it, it's all fine. Yes, absolutely. I mean, you could argue that circularity has become part of the mainstream now, as we discussed through so many different examples in the past roughly half hour. Now, where do you see the greatest challenges and opportunities, both in your role at Amer Sports, but also more broadly for the industry, and maybe even across the industries that you had the opportunity to look into?
I actually think we're still far from mainstream. It's you and I and sort of our peers. For us, it's more mainstream. We've made this sort of journey from being the weird tree hugger in the office to the boardrooms, but it's still not mainstream. There's still a lot of work to do to push sustainability and circularity into the strategy, to really integrate it as part of the strategy, to be treated as part of the strategy with the same diligence as you follow up your finances, as you do with your investments and so on. But we talk about it much more, and that I think is hugely important. So there's pressure for everybody. In terms of Amer, and maybe even more broadly, if I think about the challenges, regulation, of course, being one. So that how do we balance the good with the risks and so on. Another challenge is consumer behavior. We talked about the second-hand market and that taking off. And that looks really good and promising, and I feel very hopeful. But I hope there's more there still to come Durability is great. If your clothes last for 30 years, that's great. But if you get tired of them after 3 uses, that's not so great. So we maybe need to rethink our concept of luxury and sort of leisure and So that I think is still one challenge. People go for durability, but we see companies, I'm not going to name any, but we see companies sort of selling like hotcakes, all these €5 t-shirts and €10 dresses, and it's just by looking at it, you know that not everybody made money along the way. If the supply chains are complex for a quality garment producer like we are, how difficult it is for somebody who is not making money except on volumes. So that and then maybe it's a challenge and an opportunity, right? But we need to be very mindful that we don't get stuck with being less bad. We also need to think about how we can be more good. So in terms of Amer Sports, we talk about this a lot, that yes, of course we need to do circularity right, we need to do the climate bit right, we need to be very diligent in our supply chains. But at the core of it all is the Sustainable Development Goal number 3, good health and well-being. We also have a huge platform that we need to utilize as well as we possibly can. We're doing bits and pieces, some really, really cool programs. Salomon is working a lot with para-athletes. They've actually created trail running blades for para-athletes and run events and so on. Arc'teryx has a really cool program where they bring ethnic groups that don't traditionally enjoy the outdoors, don't do exercise, and sort of introduce them to hiking, to climbing, to this new sport.
Cool.
And we can do more of that. We have a platform, we have respected brands.
Absolutely.
So we just need to use that for good.
I really like that idea of thinking more about the good we can do rather than the bad we can stop doing or we can make up for in many cases. Thanks a lot. The coffee is empty and it's time to wrap up for this episode. I could have continued for a much longer time. I still have a long list of topics I would have loved to discuss here on the Circular Coffee Break. Thanks a lot, Anne, for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me. This was fun.
Absolutely. To all you out there listening, I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. Maybe you got some new inspiration, some new ideas of what you want to do either personally or within your organization, within your company. As mentioned earlier, if you have comments, ideas, suggestions, please leave a comment on your favorite podcast platform or drop us a note at info@tyval.com. Also, please remember to subscribe to stay in the loop. We have new episodes on a bi-weekly basis, and there's a lot of really interesting episodes still coming up as we move forward, so make sure you're not missing any of them. Thanks a lot for listening, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of you here at the Circular Coffee Break.